know, today we have the honor of having one of our conference keynote speakers with us. His name is the Reverend Dr. Heber Brown III from Baltimore, Maryland. When did you come to the knowledge of farming and personal accountability for your health?
I was born into the flow of farming far before I was even conscious or aware, but my family roots are in rural Virginia and Eastern North Carolina. And many a summers we spent down south after, or we say down the country, after school let out, we would be taken down the country and spend big chunks of the summer with my maternal great grandmother, Geraldine Castor. We called her Mama Geraldine.
Mama Geraldine.
Mama Geraldine, and spent many a time, many a summer running around in her land and watching her growing food, watching her mason jars, put her mason jars up on the shelf. And then her daughter, my grandmother, took me and my siblings, and oftentimes in her garden in the back of the house, she'd take us with her to get string beans and other vegetables off the vine and out the garden for dinner time. I didn't think nothing of that when I was growing up, but as I got older, it became more and more significant as I realized that part of our family's story.
So you grew up eating off the land.
I really did. Absolutely.
And I'm going to ask you, what part of rural Virginia?
Yeah, Northumberland County. It's a little town called Kilmarnock on my grandfather's side, grandmother's side, and Sunnybank on my grandfather's side. But it's over there in Eastern Virginia, near the water, Little Wycombe.
Tidewater, Virginia.
Tidewater, not too far. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Well, I'm from the mountainside.
Okay.
My daddy's people from Appomattox and Buckingham County.
Oh, wow. Okay, beautiful.
And I was taken back to Virginia every year, twice a year, to a house that didn't have running water, electricity, and milk the cow, churn the milk, go get the water with the pole with the 2 buckets. So, you know, I left and tell people I thought I was Laurel Ingalls Wilder Black. Little how I wasn't on the prairie, I was in the mountains, but
that's it.
It certainly was a landed experience, and it rooted me. Beautiful. In the same way that you yourself were rooted.
Beautiful.
When you were first ordained, did you think that food security would be your ministry?
Never. I did not think. It was nowhere on my mind. While I was very much so involved and still remain involved in social justice ministry as one who embraces womanist theology and Black liberation theology, food itself was not as present on the front burner of my theological understandings or social justice commitments. It was, it came to be so as I was watching members of my congregation get into the unhealthy cycle of being hospitalized over and over again for diet-related issues. And I just came to the point where I was just tired of just giving prayer and scripture and leaving it at that. It was something more that I felt like we could do. And as I listened to the people who were hospitalized and to their families and paid attention to what was going on, it became more and more apparent that food was a big part of what we could give attention to get closer to the root of their physical maladies and suffering.
You know, what you're saying to me just rings so loudly. The Black church has always been the cornerstone for social justice initiatives. And as you were speaking, I was reminded of Jesus speaking on the side with the people and the miracle of the loaves and fishes, and spending the day feeding their brains and feeding their souls, but the people got hungry, and he had to give them what they needed for them to be able to stay to get the rest of the lesson. So, you know, and for me, understanding food came from communal meals at church. When my childhood church burnt down and the parishioners got together to tear down the facility to save some money, the women of the church whose husbands were tearing down the church cooked dinner in the basement every night for 3 months till they brought that building down. And we kids were there, the runners, run this here, run that there, go take this to Miss So-and-so, you know, and keeping each other occupied. So I know that food builds community. And there's more communion than wafers and wine.
Absolutely.
So yes, I honor that. And so I guess I saw an award that you got that had a Martin Luther King Jr.'s name on it. But I saw that after I wrote this question, which says, do you see yourself carrying the social justice banner akin to SCLC and SNCC?
SCLC, absolutely. SCLC, SNCC, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer and Miss Ella Baker.
That's right.
We intentionally, the Black Panthers, our organization, we intentionally locate ourselves in the tradition of those who saw food as an avenue. And I'm thinking particularly about Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer right now in the Freedom Farm Cooperative and the Black Panthers and their free breakfast program. They saw food as an avenue to a greater end. And so we intentionally lift those names and so many others like these ancestors behind me, so that because it's a part of what distinguishes us. I mean, it's so easy to see food organizations and lump them all together and say, yeah, they're all doing the same thing and have the same worldview and the same politics that helps to govern their activities. But we are not a food charity organization. We are not primarily a food distribution organization. And this is not necessarily any shade to any others who are in those lanes, but it is to say we recognize, like Thomas Sankara did in Burkina Faso and Marcus Garvey and the UNIA did as well, and Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer did, that food is used as a political weapon. But Fannie Lou Hamer said, but if you got a pig in your backyard and some vegetables in your garden, you can feed yourself and your family and nobody can push you around. That's the kind of energy we're bringing to the food space, not a charitable, not a, anything like that, but we want to build power with our community.
You're talking about empowerment. My mother didn't talk about the battle between W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. But she said, you need to learn for your head and for your hands. Just in case they try to take the job you have, if you trained your hands, you can always figure out how to make something that you can trade for currency. If you can't trade your intellect, then trade your manual labor. So, I grew up with women who I thought of as washer women until I found myself over 40 with 2 young babies to raise. And then I realized those women were entrepreneurs. They were running businesses.
Absolutely.
And yes, they were doing the laundry of judges and lawyers and doctors, but they were being paid and they were being hired because their work was sublime. So I really appreciate that. SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership, what's that last C stand for? Conference. And then SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, for those who may not know the historical letters there. The next question I have here is, how did your community respond to the announcement of the initiative? I'm going to give it to you as a compound. If there was resistance, how was it resolved? If no resistance, how did you channel the enthusiasm?
So when we first, it was Earth Day weekend of 2000, when I was pastoring the Pleasant Hope Baptist Church, when God gave inspiration for me to share with the church, hey, y'all, let's start growing food. And I realized upon that announcement that I had been overlooking a deep well of genius that was present in our congregation the entire time and embodied in the elders who came up to Baltimore as part of the Great Migration. I did not realize that the choir president, the usher board leader, and all the other people in the church who had come north, it just didn't click for me that these were the people who grew up on farms down south. And though they left the farm never left them. And so when I stood in the pulpit and said, let's grow food, it energized and reactivated something that was already in them. And it was the seniors of the church that really grabbed took the charge and ran forward with it. I got to speak the name of Maxine Nicholas, Mother Maxine. We call her Aunt Maxine. She went home to be with the Lord in 2017. But she led the charge. She grew up on a farm with about 8 brothers and sisters in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, and came to Baltimore in the 50s. And she was the one that organized the other seniors of the church and said, come on, let's help move this issue, this growing initiative forward at our church. So it was very enthusiastically embraced. Over the years, as I've been met with some resistance or hesitation about joining in, oftentimes it's attached to the traumatic experiences that Black folk have had in the realm of agriculture, farming, and land over the
Speak on that. Yeah. We have such a resistance to being able to transmute our anger into positive power behind the lack of knowledge, because I often ponder what the original need was for Africans to be dispersed like that. Because I don't believe in coincidences. I know that there was some ordained something, and perhaps it is now coming to fore because this growing knowledge is locked in our DNA. And I know that we would shift our attitude if we understood we were kidnapped because we were brilliant, not because we were weak. We had been trading, Africans had been trading with European nations hundreds of years before the friend turned and said, wait a minute, they so hospitable. You know, when they kill each other, they give somebody to the other family. They're not using the same rules. I wonder what we could do. And then, you know, your friend becomes your what? You know, there's a short story about a bracelet that was given to one of the traditional kings, and he was invited to the ship for dinner, and he was told he'd get the other bracelet when he showed up and how valuable it would be. And when he got there, they put the other bracelet on him and it had a chain attached to it. You know, so we don't know the validity of the story, but we know that our history has been passed down to us orally. And if it didn't happen to a specific person, we know the probability is that it happened to somebody because it's just too legitimately valid as a story. So who was the first believer in your vision was the question that you just answered. Yes. And did she shout on that Sunday when you said we're going to grow food?
She saved her energy for the gardening, but the shout was in her smile and the sparkle of her eyes, and I'll forever speak her name because of her believing in her young pastor who didn't know a thing about growing nothing, but who had a vision.
The preacher with the baseball cap.
That's it. That's it. She helped her brother out.
Help a young boy, huh?
That's it. That's it. Yes,
that's wonderful. Okay, so who was your first investor other than yourself? Monetarily.
You know, monetarily. Yes. I got to shout out the Town Creek Foundation. It's no longer active. It's a private family foundation in the state of Maryland. They sunset some years ago, but they, after a period of courting, and it was a long period of courting on our part, because we study and read books. Like, we believe strongly in popular and political education in our organization. And so we've read books like The Revolution Will Not Be Funded. And because of our study and because of our paying attention to the philanthropic community here in Baltimore and other places, we know some of the pitfalls related to connecting grassroots movements for building power with the nonprofit and foundation class, and the ways that that can undermine the energy of a grassroots effort. And so we moved very slowly and very carefully in that initial relationship with the Town Creek Foundation. But as we courted one another, and for the younger viewers of this conversation, ask some elders in your circle what courting is. We courted each other. And as we courted, we eventually got to the place where we started to talk about financial support for our work. And they were the first ones in terms of a foundation. But even before they got there, it was the members of the church who put in $5, $10, who brought seeds or connected us to somebody they knew that helped them move the effort forward. And so there was a lot of social capital just within our own community to help move things forward. And then in terms of investment, it's the other churches. And we talked about the assets. And so when I can't wait for this conference. I'm gonna tell y'all about some of the assets in the Black church spaces that I believe are being overlooked. And so we're overlooking what we already have in our hand, thinking that we need what somebody else has in their hand in order to start. And I'm hopeful to send a message loud and clear at this conference to say, no, you don't start with what is in somebody else's hand. You start with what's already in your own hand.
Because all those churches got a refrigerator.
Come on.
Some of them got commercial refrigerators and commercial stoves and freezers.
Yep.
And they empty most of the week
Monday
until somebody
Saturday.
die, or it's Women's Day or Men's Day or the church anniversary.
That's right.
So I feel you. I feel you. I'm so excited to hear how people are going to feel about what you have to say. Okay. So how did you choose your previous career? Since now you're an advocate for the Lord and for the earth. Did you have a career path before you entered the ministry?
No, I've kind of been in the same vein most of my life. I'm fortunate. Growing up as a classic PK for a long time, I just wanted to be like my daddy. I just want to preach like my daddy. I get to Morgan State University for my undergrad degree, and I studied psychology. I got my degree in psychology. And at that time, I was thinking I was going to be a child therapist. And near my senior year, I just stopped fighting it and said, no, I'm going into ministry. And I ended up going into seminary. And then after seminary, got a job with a mentoring organization. And so that passion for young people was able to find a home too. And then after that mentoring nonprofit organization, I was called into the ministry, and I've been here ever since.
Wow. Well, some of us know from an early age, takes some of us till we're gray.
That's right.
To figure out where we're supposed to fit in.
However it happens, it's just that
That's
it happens.
right.
That's right.
And some of us are quick rise, and some of us are slow rise.
That's it.
And it's okay as long as we rise, right?
That's right. That's what my garden is teaching me.
So here's this next one. Do you have financial advice for those seeking the opportunity for real estate freedom, whether it be on the urban or the rural landscape?
Yes. Go sit with your elders. Go sit with your elders. You should have some elders. My younger comrades here in Baltimore would say, who's your OG? Who the people who can hold you in loving account? Go sit there first. Don't go to Google, don't go to Zillow or any other site. Go sit with your elders.
Yes.
And go sit with the grandmothers and grandfathers, aunties and uncles in your family, because chances are some of the people listening to this might have some family land that needs to be transferred to younger family members who have the energy and the drive and commitment to care for that land and make sure it does not is not taken back by the municipality or made into a Walmart or a parking lot. And my heart breaks every time I hear about Black families in particular losing their land because it did not successfully transfer from one generation to the next generation.
Yes,
so I would say start there.
We had land on Pigeon Mountain in Tennessee, from which you could see the top of Lookout Mountain. But between who gonna pay the taxes and who not gonna pay the taxes, and who won't live on top of this mountain, it now got swallowed up by the U.S. Forest Service.
Absolutely.
But there's a family cemetery in the middle of the forest, and we trek to it as often as we can.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
We don't want to forget our people, and we don't want our people to forget us.
That's right. That's right.
So here's the last thing. Are there any statements you want to make prior to the conference, or any questions you feel that need to be asked to better understand what you're going to share at the conference?
I'm going to be talking some about asset-based community development.
Okay.
And so I would invite folks to do a little poking around on that. It kind of ties to what I was saying a little earlier about looking at what you already have in your hand. I would love for folks to be thinking about food as a pathway to something greater. I'm going to be challenging notions of an exclusive food access lens. I'm going to be hopefully problematizing a nonprofit direct service framing for how we come to land and farming and food. I'm going to be inviting us to lean into, for some, it might feel like some discomfort around some racial realities that I like naming, and the other components and dimensions of what makes up our society. And so patriarchy, I want to invite us to lean into that. Sexism, I want to invite us to lean into, invite us to lean into understandings around racial capitalism. I just think many times it's very helpful to name the elephants in the room and put it on the table nice and early. And that way it can help us to resist the temptation just to fall into a simplistic food charity model that is like pouring water into a bucket with a hole at the bottom.
Right.
And so if it's really about growing the capacity of power amongst everyday people and those most directly impacted by food apartheid, we got to have tougher questions, and we got to swim upstream to see why are we hungry in the first place. We're not hungry because people don't know how to cook. We're not hungry because they keep on buying junk food over there in that community. We got to swim upstream, and hopefully I'm going to make a little bit of trouble, but in the words of John Lewis, a little bit of good trouble.
Good trouble.
So we can kind of look at some of the root causes so that our energy can be directed at the root and not just at the symptoms.
And given that, I want to ask a personal question that will help support my own research.
Sure.
I'm living currently in Dayton, although I'm go back and forth to Yellow Springs. But I grew up in southern Ohio, squeezed between West Virginia and Kentucky. Oh, wow. So I'm a bona fide hillbilly Black Appalachian.
Okay.
And I'm also a trained geographer and sociologist. So I'm very cognizant about land use. Yeah. And I'm holding this theory and this thesis that the shift in transportation patterns divested food sources from urban realities. And then with the long distance, like Transcontinental Railroad, we were able to bring food from other regions, so we stopped eating seasonally because everything was available. And then with the inclusion of the interstate transportation system and refrigerated cars on wheels and on rail, mom and pop store and the meat market and the greengrocer and the fishmonger all got lumped underneath one grocery store label. And the bigger the parking lot, the easier it is for the 18-wheeler to turn around. Now, maybe the bus stops there, but there ain't no parking lot big enough for an 18-wheeler to turn around in the middle of Baltimore.
That's right. That's right.
So have you seen the impact of transportation shifts affect the people of Baltimore's access to healthy food?
Absolutely. And I think that's such a fascinating way to engage and enter the conversation around foodways and the like. Honestly, I've not gone as deep, obviously, as you have on it. But when I think about the history of highways in many majority Black cities currently, and how those highways toured right through the middle of Black neighborhoods and displaced so many Black families in the 20th century, there's a tie there. I see another tie with the Homeowners Loan Corporation maps in the 1930s and the ways that they defined how these cities would look. And so I think what your comment is making me do is think about the ways that the multiple systems work together to create the dynamic under which we are living today, and how its requirement, back to what I was saying earlier about popular education, we can't go to a whole lot of schools to do the type of deep analysis from a grassroots perspective that'll have us to look at some of these issues. And so we have to create our own learning circles. And I'm tipping the hat to Paulo Freire and Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and others, Miles Horton, the Highlander Folk School,
right,
the citizen schools, that helped us to see that if we're going to come into awareness and be given room for reflection, we need to have the kind of spaces to study what you just said and put it in combination to put it in connection with the homeowners, the housing pattern of housing,
redlining and housing,
all of it. This is a varied and multidisciplinary beast. And so I believe that it requires at least a similar approach to the study, which is why the praxis is so important. So the doing and the study and reflection and the journaling and everything all together, I think make this very important. But that's a fascinating thing you just said. And I'm going to think about that.
Thank you for your contribution to it. I'm continuing to beat it until it makes sense.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I want to ask one last question. How big is the network? How many congregations are in communion with each other around food security?
Absolutely. 185 member churches of the Black Church Food Security Network, from Los Angeles, California, to Brooklyn, New York, to Jacksonville, Florida. And soon I'm going to be in Miami because churches down there are reaching out. This thing is growing and spreading, and I'm really grateful for the ways that it's scaling deep. So I'm not enamored or hypnotized by, we want to get big numbers, because you can have big stuff and be an inch deep in that community. So what I'm really excited by is the ways in which we're organizing in local communities and setting up local coordinating committees. And so we have local coordinating committees in Jacksonville, Florida. We are in DC. We are in Baltimore, of course. And we have fledgling committees coming up in Greensboro, North Carolina area, the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. And so little by little, we're helping to organize groups of people and then resource them, support them, cheerlead them, and be a partner to how they are seeing it in their neighborhood, and then putting it in conversation and connection with the city that's 3 hours north and the one that's 3 hours south. And as we continue to do this Ella Baker model of organizing like a spider web, there's no one leader who's like, so please be clear, I run my mouth, but I am not like some Superman that's coming in to save the day. It is Miss Maxine. It's Miss Patsy Appleberry. It's Miss Lolita Watkins. It's Dr. Laureen Husband and all the other folks who will never get a chapter in nobody's history book, but you best believe this network is not growing without their leadership and gifts.
Well, I'm going to declare you an evangelist.
I'll take it.
That's what it sounds like it is to me, and as a person entering into what I hope will be a long ride into eldership.
Yeah.
My father is 93.
Wow.
In 24 years, I'll be 93. So I am excited to hear your passion. I'm excited to know that you found the cross you were supposed to carry.
Yes.
And that you are like a good soldier, soliciting others to come help carry your cross, the cross, their own cross, and make a parade of people carrying crosses.
Woo, I love it.
And my soul says you might even make church relevant again. Because nobody knows what's on the other side. We can just hope that we're in the right relationship, that we get that eternal vacation that we all seek. But before we get there, we got to be healthy.
That's it.
And we have to have long memories so we can tell our grandchildren and our great nieces and nephews how to get over.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I'm telling you, when I thought my life was falling apart, it was only in the reflection of those same women.
Come on.
That had those home-based businesses.
Come on.
That I said, if they can do it without high school diplomas, I got a degree. I better get up here and shout. So my good brother, the Reverend Dr. Heber Brown III, daddy of the fourth.
Yeah.
It has been an honor to have a conversation with you and your people.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm going to be anticipating an opportunity to tell others here in Dayton and in our bioregion what you're doing. And soon we hope to see you in person so that we can fellowship and break bread together. Thank you for the time you spent today promoting our annual Black Farming Conference.
Thank you, Mama O.